Hello, everyone. Welcome. Hello. Welcome to the Appraisal Standard Board Artificial Intelligence and USPAP Shaping Future Standards and Ethics Forum. My name is Michelle Chikolsky-Bradley, and I am chair of the Appraisal Standards Board. Very glad to see we have such a large number of attendees registered for this forum. Welcome. This is being recorded, and you will be available to watch this on the Foundation's YouTube channel. Really glad to have you here with us today. So logistics, we're going to format this meeting just a bit different than normal. So I'd like to go over some of the new logistics and a little bit of housekeeping. You can see today's agenda on your screen. We have forum objectives today. We're exploring current standards related to AI that exist within USPAP. We want to understand the current and projected AI tools available to valuation professionals and consider the adequacy of existing guidance and identify potential areas for improvement. Our agenda will begin with USPAP standards and guidance. Vice Chair Nick Piltz and I will go through that. Then we're going to move on to the speakers presenting today on artificial intelligence and their areas of expertise. The board will have a Q&A with the speakers after each panelist presents. Then we will open it up to you for general questions and answers. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to add them right into the Q&A box. If you have a comment to share, please add it into the chat box. I beg you all to take that survey at the end of the webinar. Please do fill that out. It really does help us. The board will hear from 6 panelists on artificial intelligence related to education, data processing, AVMs, and legal implications of AI and valuation, just to name a few. But before today's forum, I want you to know that each panelist received a set of questions to address in their presentation. Each panelist will have 10 minutes to summarize their responses and offer any additional insights. After each presentation, the board will take just a few moments to ask follow-up questions. And we do have 6 speakers today, so I'm asking everyone, please be mindful of the time constraints to ensure we complete the forum within the allotted 2 hours. Everyone joining us today will also get a chance to ask questions via the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will monitor the questions, and if time permits, we will ask them of the panelists. There will be an open forum at the end of the event for audience participation. If we run out of time, please don't hesitate to send your questions or comments to asb@appraisalfoundation.org. On your screen and on video, you will see the members of the ASB. Since we are on a very tight schedule, we're dispensing with introductions, but please feel free to go to the board webpage on the Foundation's website to learn more about the members of the Appraisal Standards Board. So welcome again. Today we are having a very important discussion on generative artificial intelligence, USPAP, and our guidance material. Technological advances are rapidly transforming not only our profession, but the world at large. And generative AI is increasingly becoming a standard tool. As appraisers, we must understand its implications for our practice, particularly concerning USPAP and guidance. While AI offers significant benefits, it also presents risks, especially in terms of exacerbating disparities if not implemented responsibly. It's essential that USPAP and our guidance continue to uphold fairness, transparency, and the high standards our profession demands. Government regulators are closely watching the adoption of AI, especially in the mortgage sector. For us, it's crucial to recognize both the opportunities and the challenges AI presents. AI tools can bring greater efficiency and accuracy to our work, but their use must be guided by sound professional judgment. Appraisers must remain vigilant, ensuring that AI enhances rather than replaces human expertise, and that it's used ethically. The board is carefully evaluating whether our guidance is adequate or if further clarity is needed. Just as regulators work with technologists to innovate while maintaining accountability, we too must responsibly adopt new tools, ensuring compliance with ethical standards and maintaining the credibility of our results. Clarity in the requirements of ethics and competency is essential. But it isn't just the insights from experts we have here today that the ASB needs to hear from. As always, we need to hear from you. So again, add questions in the Q&A box, or if you're watching the recording of this on the Foundation's YouTube channel, please send us a message, asb@appraisalfoundation.org. In the next several minutes, Vice Chair Nick Piltz and I will be discussing how USPAP currently touches on some AI-related topics. Several stakeholders have asked the board to explore this topic further. And today we are here to listen to the opinions of some of these stakeholders that will help us inform the work of the board. Please note that the views of the panelists are their own and they are not endorsed by the board or its members. So let's talk a little bit about USPAP and existing guidance now. We will touch on the ethics rule, the competency rule, as well as development and reporting standards, plus guidance. So Nick, Vice Chair Nick Piltz, do you have anything else you want to add before we move into the specifics?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Artificial intelligence, depending on how it's defined, encompasses both established tools and rapidly advancing technologies like machine learning. While artificial intelligence is not specifically covered in the rules and standards rules themselves, USPAP does establish requirements that govern the use of all analytical tools, including artificial intelligence. Today, we are opening this forum by explaining current USPAP requirements and existing guidance related to these analytical tools, including artificial intelligence.
Okay, so let's first talk about where we are right now. So I'm going to start with USPAP guidance material if I can. So one of the key pieces of guidance that touches on technology is Advisory Opinion 37, which is all about computer-assisted evaluation tools. And it includes advice on how to use things like regression analysis tools or MLS analytics that help us analyze data faster than we ever could by hand. But there is a competency component here. Just because we have these new tools doesn't mean we get to turn our brains off, right?
Correct. AO 37 addresses the necessity of an appraiser's obligation when utilizing these tools. These tools assist in data analysis that in the past may have to be done by hand. Appraisers must have the final judgment to ensure that the results are appropriate. Ultimately, the responsibility rests with the appraiser to ensure credible assignment results.
That sounds to me like you're talking about the competency rule, I think. Competency may apply to factors such as how familiar an appraiser is with specific types of properties or a geographic area or even an analytical method. In other words, it's not just about letting the computer spit out a number and calling it a day. We've got to make sure that that number makes sense given the intended use of the assignment. And the definition of credible in USPAP says that credible assignment results require support to the degree necessary for the intended use. Nick, why don't you break that down for us?
Yeah, certainly. The competency rule is explicit. It applies to both the appraiser's knowledge of the property and the analytic method employed. Appraisers using tools such as regression analysis or automated models must possess sufficient understanding of those tools' functions. While a deep understanding of the underlying algorithms are not required, appraisers must be competent in the application and the interpretation of the output.
So it's kind of like driving a car. right? So you don't need to know how the engine works, but you better be sure you know how to steer. And we can't just assume the computer knows everything. We certainly can't assume that artificial intelligence knows everything. An appraiser must still evaluate the credibility of the data and make sure it's not sending the appraiser off in the wrong direction.
Exactly. AO 37 also emphasizes that appraisers should not rely on technology without understanding the potential limitations of the data being analyzed. This is particularly relevant, for example, when examining the correlation of the data in regression analysis. Simply relying on an output without understanding if the correlation is weak or strong will directly impact the credibility of the opinion or conclusions drawn from that information.
Couldn't have said that better myself. Now let's pivot over to the new 2024 question and answer that the Appraisal Standards Board recently released. This one was about artificial intelligence directly. So it's not just regular technology, but full on artificial intelligence. We've got to be super careful with these tools. Nick, do you want to dive into the specifics of that?
Yeah, the Q&A issued in 2024 clarifies the obligations of appraisers when integrating AI into the appraisal process. Whether the AI tool is used to generate an output for analysis or just to assist in communicating a result, it must never serve as a substitute for the appraiser's judgment. The appraiser is responsible for ensuring that the AI-generated output is credible and the tool is employed with constraints of USPAP's ethical and competency requirements.
Yeah, that's right. AI can be great, but if you don't understand the strengths and the weaknesses of the tool, it can really signal trouble for the appraiser. And it's not just about the numbers either. Some of these AI tools, like chatbots or image recognition software, can have many functions that can be adapted to appraisal practice, such as helping the appraiser write reports or summarizing data. But, and this is a really big but, you've got to make sure you're not sharing anything confidential. If you put sensitive information into a chatbot, it might not stay secret.
Absolutely. Yeah, the confidentiality section of the ethics rule is unequivocal.
Mhm.
Appraisers are prohibited from disclosing confidential information to unauthorized parties. This includes AI systems, which may store or inadvertently share sensitive data. The appraiser must remain vigilant in ensuring that these tools that they use comply with both legal and ethical requirements of USPAP.
So here's the big takeaway, folks. AI and all these cool tools, they sure are helpful, but they're a tool. They don't replace us. We are the ones, appraisers are the ones that think, analyze, verify. The appraiser's expertise, judgment, and responsibility matter. We've got to stay on top of the changes in technology to make sure we're using these tools correctly and understand their strengths and their weaknesses, or use tools that can lead appraisers to produce reports that are misleading.
Yeah. I think that, Michelle, brings us to the core reason for this forum. We have to
Yeah.
ask ourselves whether USPAP in its current form is sufficient to address the evolving landscape of technology, including AI. Does it need to adapt? Is our guidance adequate? Or is there an additional need for different forms of guidance to maintain the integrity of the appraisal process?
That's what we're here to find out today. We've got a solid foundation with USPAP, but with AI evolving so fast, we've got to keep asking, does something need to change? Should we update the rules or add more guidance? And if so, what is it that needs updated?
Indeed, as members of the Appraisal Standards Board, we are committed to evaluating how USPAP should evolve to address emerging technologies. Our responsibility is to ensure that standards continue to foster credible appraisal results in an increasing complex technological environment.
Thanks so much for going over that, Nick. So now that we've looked at USPAP and guidance a bit, it's time to hear from our speakers. Thank you all for being part of this conversation. And let's explore what's next for USPAP in this AI-driven world. So first up, I would like to welcome our first panelist, Sean Telford. Sean, as you know, each panelist has 10 minutes for their presentation. If you would like to briefly introduce yourself and give us your thoughts on this topic.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I'm Sean Telford. I'm a certified residential appraiser. I'm based in Mississippi, where I work as the Chief Valuation Officer at CoreLogic. And these comments will be my own and may not necessarily represent those of my employer or any of the boards or other official affiliations I have. Thank you to the Appraisal Foundation and the Standards Board for convening this forum. Directing the focus of appraisal leaders towards future opportunities in technology is a key to ensuring the appraisal profession adapts and succeeds amidst rapid change. I'm honored to have contributed to the appraisal industry over the years and appreciate this opportunity. I'm certain that technology and AI are transformative opportunities that elevate our quality of life, shape the future of our profession, and empower appraisers to make smarter, more informed decisions every day. I see news about AI every day and its impact, and I wonder if everyone really understands what it is. This news also makes me think about my wife's ignored advice last year to invest in AI stocks, especially every time I see NVIDIA's 190% year-over-year growth. Google defines artificial intelligence as a set of technologies that enables computers to perform a variety of advanced functions, including the ability to see, understand, and translate spoken and written language, and analyze data, categorize objects, and provide intelligent data retrieval. Answering the first question, is the impact of artificial intelligence on the real estate industry a transformation or a takeover? AI and technology are transforming the real estate sector. The internet has simplified access to real property data. By merely entering a property address, anyone can immediately access a wealth of information and images, including an estimate of market value. Most people now search for homes online before reaching out to a real estate agent. Agents use technology to create virtual tours, virtually staged properties, automatically input and correct MLS data, and check images for compliance. AI allows buyers to simulate financing options before and after remodeling scenarios and to instantly estimate a home's current and future value. Lenders, insurers, government entities, they all leverage AI to predict physical risks to real property, including weather and climate impacts down to the parcel level. These tools also offer detailed insights into the property traits, ownership, and market value trends. AVMs are becoming more valuable to clients thanks to improved computing power and access to vast property data and images. Mortgage lenders employ AI in online loan applications, in electronically gathering documentation, retrieving details about a property, and a value estimate. Automated tools verify and analyze employment, assets, liabilities, bank balances, tax records, and credit histories, instantly accelerating the process and reducing lender risk. AI aids in detecting fraud, assists in underwriting loans and the collateral, reviews photos, flagging issues, and ensures document accuracy and precision. Appraisers have benefited over the years from transformative technology. Mobile phones with cameras, websites, GPS mapping, fax machines, laser printers, email, PDF files, video conferencing, voice recognition, cloud storage, lasers and LiDAR to measure, drones, electronic key boxes, tools that calculate adjustments and help understand cash flow analysis. These are just a few of the innovations that have benefited the profession and will continue to transform and create transparency, simplification, and more options for consumers and businesses. To the second question, what are the implications of artificial intelligence in the appraisal profession? Hypersubstance. Technology-enabled AI has substantially influenced the appraisal industry. Consequently, appraisers and stakeholders must evolve, with appraisers taking on a pivotal role in effectively and appropriately incorporating AI-based solutions into meeting their clients' real estate valuation needs. AI helps create comprehensible outputs derived from data to help inform decisions, strategies, and actions. Information is data made valuable and accessible, an integral component of decision-making, and where AI has massive implications for the appraisal profession. Many tasks appraisers do today will be automated or made easier. Recently, when my washing machine broke, I fixed it in 10 minutes using YouTube video guides instead of calling a repair person. However, when my dryer the next month emitted a burning smell, I opted to call an expert for safety reasons in spite of finding potential fixes online. Similarly, AI will transform tasks performed by appraisers. The profession itself is not vanishing, rather the role of appraisers is evolving. Overcoming the fear of new technologies and their impact on current norms is crucial. The printing press was initially rejected due to concern over disseminating knowledge and causing job loss for scribes. Many rejected microwave ovens, fearing side effects. President Benjamin Harrison, the first to reside in an electrically powered White House, would not use light switches out of fear of electric shock. It's the responsibility of the industry leaders to ensure that professionals in appraisal are equipped with the necessary skills and education to succeed in the AI-influenced future and to ensure the public understands the value of the appraiser's input. AI language models today enable us to ask our devices questions, and they process data and present the results. Technical analysts writing database queries are no longer necessary. Appraisers can analyze vast amounts of market data using AI, extracting more market information and faster than any human could. The pandemic demonstrated the effectiveness of using technology in data collection, shifting the discussion to where and when to use these methods. Even with these advancements, the appraiser's expertise remains unique and essential for interpreting results, delivering analysis, and presenting supported opinions. The residential valuation's success in using technology to automate appraisal processing and scoring has given lenders in the secondary market powerful insights into the appraisals securing residential loans. Fannie and Freddie have shared insights derived using technology and AI, identifying areas of concern and providing guidance. Their extensive industry-wide analysis illustrates the power of AI and technology and has profoundly influenced the residential appraisal sector, opening new opportunities for appraisers to step up. By asking, how can we contribute to this transformation, appraisers can boost their significance, shape the future, and aid in developing trustworthy valuation products while mitigating bias and other challenges. What measures can be implemented to prevent bias and discrimination in artificial intelligence models? The appraisal profession has the opportunity to establish itself as a critical source of expertise in ensuring that AI is used in property valuations is applied responsibly, including the prevention of bias and in line with regulation and law. Developers need that specialized knowledge and skills of valuation professionals who can effectively communicate and in terms of technological concepts. To avoid unintended outcomes such as model bias, developers and users must grasp and manage the three essential elements for AI: the data used by the model, the technology or model implemented, and the procedures for monitoring, adjusting, and validating the model's output. Responsible providers and users have long established governance processes to ensure proper use and compliance, and these are expanding as AI adoption grows. Governance is critical for meeting compliance demands and preventing bias. Engaging qualified appraisers in these steps can help ensure valuation models and AI adhere to regulation, guidance, and laws. This participation in governance can include collaborating with the solution providers, assessing the application of these tools, and examining the AI's output on a transactional basis. Results produced by AI models, especially in risk-sensitive areas, may require human review. ChatGPT and Copilot warn users to review the output. In healthcare, when doctors use AI in transcribing a patient's notes, a doctor-patient's notes, hospitals require the physician to verify the accuracy of the transcription. The level of risk associated with the AI's application will determine the necessary level and type of review. Note the hospital's guidance emphasizes the responsible use of the technology rather than limiting it. Proper application of AI is essential for achieving optimal results, including minimizing the risk of bias or discrimination. rather than trying to alter or restrict the technology. If appraisers are to be involved in the development, implementation, and supervision of technology, they must have what is needed in terms of education and technology skills to be of use. Developers of AI tools must comply with current rules in the mortgage, banking, and financial industries. USPAP standards emphasize appraisers' responsibility to stay up to date on evolving valuation methods to prevent significant mistakes or omissions. And USPAP allows appraisers to engage in all types of appraisal practice and valuation services. We're on the verge of significant improvements in how data, technology, and AI will impact the valuation process, creating new options for businesses and consumers. The appraisal profession must focus on leading and adapting to the use of AI in valuations and moving forward rather than maintaining the status quo. Those who hire us today are under no obligation to hire us in the future. As leaders in the appraisal profession, we have a responsibility to create an environment where the opportunities of AI in valuation are embraced by appraisers and that they have the requisite education, understanding, and skill to take a leading role and to be of use to clients in responsibly bringing the full potential of AI to property valuations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sean. That was just so interesting. I can't wait till the YouTube recording comes out so I can watch that again. Board members, if you could come online on camera, and I'm going to ask if there are any questions for Sean from the board. And please remember, we have only a few short minutes in between. Any questions?
Yes, thank you, Michelle. I have a question.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Sean, it was such an interesting presentation. Is there something different about generative AI compared to past technologies, such as the internet or spreadsheet programs, that are causing clients to pause and reconsider disclosure requirements for how appraisals are developed and reported?
When I look at the technology that we're dealing with today, the power of the computing is significant. And the data, there's always been massive amounts of data available. However, the power to process all of that quickly has been challenging. And that's the computing power combined with the AI-based models has significantly improved the amount of data that can be analyzed and the time and the usefulness of all of that. And of course, when it comes to using these tools, it's important to understand that they are being used and that they are being used responsibly. I don't think any of the ultimate consumers of appraiser services want things done in a vacuum, so to speak. But they do, I'm certain, themselves want to take advantage of these tools. And to the extent that's reasonable and appropriate, the providers that they engage with to also use those tools. Ultimately, we're just trying to drive a better result that's transparent and that's clear and useful for all of the stakeholders involved.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one more question. Is there one more question from the board members?
Hi, Sean. This is Tim Hansen. I had one quick question. You discussed the advancement in technology from the calculator to the internet to where we are today with the generative AI. How different or similar is that advancement in AI to the technology leaps of the past?
It's interesting when I was preparing to think about all the impact of those changes, right? Just simply the ability to email an appraisal or upload it versus driving around. I mean, the impacts were massive relative to where we were. And I think that as the capabilities of AI and the applications of AI-based technologies continue to expand and we apply them, we'll learn more and more ways that we can use those tools. And in my opinion, the impact will just continue to grow. I mean, you can't put any of this back in the bottle, so to speak. It's just going to continue to grow and expand as more and more people become accustomed to and familiar with and educated about how to utilize the technology and its usefulness. And the language models and the generative AI and all of those models that allow anyone to ask a very easy question that actually is very complex to solve. It's amazing where we can see this go. So I would see that the impact continues to be massive and almost, difficult, if not impossible, to quantify how these things will affect how we do our work and how we live our lives.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much, board members. We're going to move on. Thank you, Sean. We're going to move on to our second panelist. We have Jim Amron. Would like to welcome to our forum. Jim, would you like to briefly introduce yourself and give us 10 minutes of your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, thank you, Michelle, and thank you to the ASB for having us here today. I think this is going to be, I'm going to learn a lot through this as well, and hope to convey some things that might be helpful. So my first question here is, how do you envision generative AI transforming appraisal practice over the next several years? And we've already had some questions about, kind of where we stand with this. And I think while we're in the middle of it, it's sometimes hard to tell whether this is a revolution or an evolution. But either way, generative AI is poised to significantly transform the profession by enhancing the efficiency and accuracy of our work. Over the next several years, AI will likely streamline many routine tasks. For example, AI tools can analyze property characteristics as shown in photos and get complete narrative descriptions quickly and accurately. Recent sales data and market trends can be analyzed, enabling appraisers to better identify comparable properties and support potential adjustments much more efficiently. These tools can analyze documents, summarize findings, and Gen AI can develop complex Excel files or even help create automated valuation models. AI systems can also assist in writing narrative sections of appraisal reports by summarizing data and generating initial drafts, which the appraiser can then review and refine. One use case for me involved using Gen AI to generate a draft of a market analysis by integrating various data sources, such as property listings, economic indicators, and historical sales trends. I then use this draft as a starting point, allowing me to focus more on the final analysis and the interpretation of the data. And this approach, if followed by others, will allow appraisers to concentrate more on the complex aspects of our work. However, the transformation will not be without challenges. As AI becomes more prevalent, it will be essential for appraisers to maintain control of the tools that they are using. This includes a basic understanding of the underlying way generative AI models work and ensuring that the AI outputs are accurate, unbiased, and relevant to the specific context of each appraisal assignment. For instance, if an AI tool suggests an output that is inconsistent with your experience and knowledge, you must investigate further rather than accept the AI's conclusion at face value. This role of human oversight, I think, is going to become much more critical. While AI can augment the appraisal process, it cannot replace the need for professional judgment. For example, in one case using AI to analyze market area data, it suggested that a certain area was declining in value. However, using my local knowledge, I recognized that the area was undergoing a revitalization with new developments underway, and information was not yet captured in the AI's training data and the information that I had initially prompted the model with. And this, to me, illustrates the necessity for a hybrid approach, leveraging AI for its computational power while applying human expertise to interpret and validate the results, ensuring that the final appraisal reflects both technological insights and nuanced human judgment. And for the second question here, what cautions would you offer to appraisers who are currently relying on artificial intelligence in their practice? There's a lot to be said here, but I'll try and summarize it like this. Integrating AI into your appraisal practice offers substantial benefits, but it also comes with significant responsibilities and risks. One of the primary cautions I would offer is the risk of over-reliance on AI tools. I heard recently of an appraiser who used AI to help generate a valuation, but the AI's tools was based on incomplete or outdated data. In fact, the AI generated or hallucinated sales, and the appraiser did not double check. That appraiser, relying too heavily on the AI's analysis, submitted the report without sufficiently verifying the data, leading to a misleading appraisal at best. While this is an extreme case, it's indicative of what can happen when these tools are used improperly. And I want to highlight that point just a little bit. The way these models are generally built, they are designed to answer your questions or to solve your prompts. And in their zeal or earnestness to kind of answer questions for you, sometimes they'll make stuff up to give you an answer that you're looking for. So you really need to be careful. Another critical caution is the ethical implications of AI use,
Hey,
particularly
Jim, could I
around.
ask you to speak up just a little bit? We had a few people saying that they're having a hard time hearing you. So if you
Oh,
could just
okay.
speak up a bit.
No
Great, that's
problem.
awesome. So sorry to interrupt you.
No problem. Let me get the mic a little bit closer too. So another critical caution is in the ethical implications of AI use, particularly concerning bias and transparency. We can't get away from those terms these days, it seems like. But these AI tools can inadvertently perpetuate biases that are present in their training data. That can lead to unfair or even discriminatory outcomes. For instance, if an AI tool is trained on data that reflects historical redlining practices, it may perpetuate these issues when providing results. And I want to really highlight this point because I don't think it's thought about often enough, but it's just as critical in how you prompt these tools. Biased or unclear instructions to the models can also result in less than honorable outputs. Appraisers have got to be vigilant in identifying and mitigating these biases, ensuring that their use of AI aligns with the ethical standards and does not compromise fairness of their appraisals. And finally, appraisers must maintain a clear line between AI assistance and human decision making. AI should enhance, not replace, your role in the valuation process. For example, AI might suggest that a certain factor, such as proximity to a major highway, should decrease a property's value. But the appraiser might know from experience that in this market, buyers value the accessibility that that highway provides, and thus that factor should be weighted differently. This kind of highlights the need for the appraiser to retain final responsibility for all decisions and ensuring that the AI generated content is accurate, relevant, and used appropriately. And like, I'm so sure so many of the panelists have been thinking about this when we were first asked to do this. I've kind of thought about this and kind of come up with a framework of about 6 items that I think are important for the ethical use of AI. And let me just summarize those real quickly for you here. The first one is competency in AI technologies. Appraisers should be competent in the AI tools they use. Each one of the large language models out there that I've used have differences, and understanding how they respond to your prompts is important. So you need to understand the tool's capabilities, its limitations, any appropriate applications to those models. Some are better at certain features than others. And competence ensures that appraisers can critically evaluate the AI outputs, integrate them effectively into their appraisal processes. And this certainly aligns with the USPAP competency rule. The second item of the framework is ensuring truthfulness and accuracy. You're probably going to hear this a lot from a lot of the speakers, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, but it's ultimately your appraisal report. So anything you put in there, you darn sure better validate. And certainly if it's coming from artificial intelligence, cross-referencing that with other trusted sources or using other methodologies is a good way to avoid potentially biased or erroneous outputs. Nick and Michelle talked a lot about confidentiality, and I think that's another really important thing. And I think it's one of the areas where I see some pushback from clients on. But AI systems used by appraisers must adhere to strict confidentiality measures. This may require the appraiser to develop their own secure in-house LLMs. There's a lot of them that are out there that are available that are fairly easy to integrate. So you're not sending your information out someplace else, it's maintaining it in-house. Or you can use things like encryption or anonymization to protect some sensitive information. Again, talking about the ethics rule of USPAP, this is really important to maintain that client confidentiality. The fourth thing is avoiding bias in AI. You have to ensure that your use of AI does not introduce or perpetuate biases, particularly against protected classes. Verification and testing should be employed to identify and mitigate any biases in AI model outputs, ensuring compliance with Fair Housing Act, USPAP guidelines, or other rules that may apply in your particular jurisdiction. And on this fifth one, I talk about communicating AI use to clients. And I'm going to admit that this one might be a little bit controversial, but let me just get through it and I'll explain why. There's no doubt that transparency about AI use can enhance client trust, but I do not believe appraisers should be required to disclose which specific tools or software they use unless it directly affects the appraisal outcomes or the client has specifically required disclosure. I have seen clients who say you can use it, but you need to disclose that you use it. Obviously, in those cases, you need to disclose. I've had clients in engagement letters say you cannot use artificial intelligence. Of course, in those cases, I would not use it. But to me, this kind of aligns with current practices, the not having to disclose specific tools that you use. We don't have to say which software package we use, whether it's a la mode or SREP or ACI. We don't have to tell them the brand of laptop that we use. We don't have to tell them that we used a laser measuring device or LiDAR or an old rusty tape. The focus should really be on the credibility and integrity of the final appraisal report, regardless of the tools that are used. And then item number 6 is one that's near and dear to my heart. I really believe that there has to be a human agency in this process. We need to have the final judgment and decision-making authority over these tools and use AI to enhance rather than replace what we do as humans. And so, Michelle, I think that finalizes my comments. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, board members. If you'll come back on screen, are there any questions for Jim?
Hi, Michelle. I have a question. Jim, thank you for being here. In your presentation, you emphasized the need for human oversight in AI-assisted appraisals, and specifically, when an appraiser recognizes that the output is inconsistent with their experience and their knowledge, further investigation should be undertaken. Do you think that guidance is needed in that realm, or is there sufficient guidance already? And if you don't think additional guidance is needed, what guidance do you follow when you perform that?
Well, it's a great question, Ray, and take what I'm about to say with a bit of a grain of salt, because I tend to believe less regulation is better than more. But I do believe strongly in guidance. And I do think that providing some examples for appraisers, situations that they may encounter are very helpful. I think the Q&As that the foundation does are fantastic. For me, when I first started using artificial intelligence, admittedly, my experiences was really bad back in November of 2022 when I first started doing this stuff. But I realized it was a me problem. I didn't understand how to use the model. So I think education is critical. How to use these tools is important. I think the guidance that the ASB put out in the Q&A recently was fantastic. But to kind of get to your question, I don't know that there needs to be a lot of specific rules around that. This stuff changes, and I really believe in timeless guidance, but being competent. And if something doesn't feel right and it doesn't smell right, it's probably not right. And you need to kind of dig a little bit deeper as a result of that.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, Michelle, this is Zach Myers. I have a question for Jim.
Okay.
Jim, you mentioned the importance of appraisers understanding the capabilities and the limitations of AI tools. What, if any, gaps do you see in the current requirements or guidance regarding the use of AI in appraisals, and how do you think we should, address these gaps to better align with the evolving use of AI technologies?
Zach, thanks for the question. I'm not sure that I see a lot of gaps. I think some guidance around kind of that framework that I talked about. You need to be competent. You need to make sure that your outputs are not biased. You need to, be transparent in your use if that's necessary for the assignment results, and you need to take responsibility for what you're doing. I think you all already have a model kind of in place. How you deal with automated valuation models in a way is similar to how I think you need to think about artificial intelligence, at least as a standalone. These things are not people. I am guilty just as much as anybody of kind of anthropomorphizing these things and trying to turn them into a human, but they're not. It's just an algorithm that's running. And so ultimately, I think the appraiser needs to be responsible for what they put in their appraisal reports or in their valuation assignments. And ultimately how they get to those decisions, I think, is probably more for the appraiser to determine on an assignment basis than some strict rules that come around that.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. Great presentation. We're going on to our next panelist now. I'm very excited to welcome Lourdes Fuentes, and you have the floor for 10 minutes. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. So my name is Lourdes Fuentes. I am the CEO of Carta Legal, which is a legal operations and law firm practice management firm. I am not an appraiser, although Nick and I worked for about 10 years together. I am a lawyer. So my sort of views are all related to the transformational shift that has happened since OpenAI released ChatGPT in November of 2022. As you probably all know, lawyers are kind of allergic to all things technology. But this time I think is different. I think the fact that the generative AI capabilities affect everything in a law firm practice or legal department has really triggered some thinking and thoughts behind all of the new ethical challenges that we have with generative AI specifically. And some of you have spoken about this already, but I want to emphasize that the generative AI is significantly different from traditional AI because it creates new outputs. And generative AI can be divided in several different components, right? We think of ChatGPT as generative AI, but ChatGPT is only one type of generative AI, right? It's a text-based generative AI. What are the legal issues that arise out of the text-based generative AI like ChatGPT or Gemini or Bard? There's several concerns with intellectual property, of course. Data privacy, which is the one that hits home the most for lawyers. There is the risk of defamation and misinformation because of all the hallucinations that still happen. Bias and discrimination are other things that we have to deal with. There's also other types of generative AI that are not discussed as much in the general public, but also will be significant for lawyers and their practices. The image-based generative AI like Dale or Midjourney, copyright infringement is huge for that. That also relates to the music-based generative AI. Right of publicity is another legal issue. Trademark violations, of course. And content moderation are all huge problems that we're going to have with generative AI. Audio-based generative AI, that's political propaganda, deep fakes, the risks for fraud and other issues that arise out of the audio-based generative AI are significant, equally applicable to video generative AI. So all of these are legal issues that are of concern. There is evolving regulation around artificial intelligence that includes generative AI. We probably in the US will follow the lead of Europe. As you know, the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation that Europe released in 2018 was kind of the trigger for a lot of what the regulations in the US turn out to be. So the EU passed a new artificial intelligence act that will be effective in 2026. That also, I think, paves the way for a lot of what the US regulators are thinking. And it sort of includes really strict measures for protection of data. And it even includes sort of a list of prohibitive AI systems, like manipulative or deceptive AI systems that use subliminal techniques or social scoring systems. All of those things are prohibited in the US in the EU under this act. So I think we have a lot to learn from all of the work that has been done there. The US at the state level and local level, they've also been really concerned since generative AI became a thing. Colorado just passed a law that I think is effective in 2024 already, that targets algorithm discrimination, and it affects every business in Colorado that uses algorithm sort of tools to create outputs. The most interesting one that I have read so far, it's one coming out of New York City, actually. It's Local Rule 144, effective January 2023. And this one basically establishes rules around automated employment decision tools and prohibits any employer or employment agency from using AEDTs for an employment decision. So screening a candidate for employment, employee promotions, et cetera. So I think that's a very sort of detail-oriented local rule coming out of New York that gives us some guidance of what we should be thinking about with respects to bias and discrimination. And this rule is interesting because it requires the informed consent of the employee and the sort of knowledge and publication that a screening tool is being used, and the employee can decide to apply or not apply, or apply but be accepted from the sort of the artificial intelligence tool. Biden came out last November with an executive order. As we all know, executive orders are not law or regulation, but it provides some good guidance for federal agencies. So all of those things are very interesting, I think, for us to consider and think about as we move forward in this transition. How do we as lawyers are addressing ethics and competency? Our rules are the model rules of professional conduct that govern lawyers, and actually the ABA created the model rules, but they've been adopted either verbatim or with slight modifications in all 50 states, plus the District of Columbia. That's sort of the Bible, much like the Constitution. The guidelines never change. Sometimes they're amended, and the amendments come as part of the commentary to the rules. The last huge amendment that happened on those model rules was in 2012, when attorneys were told that they needed to be technically competent. And that sort of triggered a lot of debate about what that really means. But again, with the release of generative AI, what it means to be a technically competent lawyer sort of is even more complicated. But we have a whole bunch of rules that can apply to generative AI concerns. The rule of competency is one of them, but also we have the rule to keep our clients' data confidential. That's rule 1.6. And that is sort of paramount when we are using data processing systems. We also have rule 5.1 and 5.3, which talk about supervision and of both lawyers and supervision of what we call non-lawyer assistants. And that could be a chatbot or any tool that we use. Basically, under this rule, the new interpretation that I would give to you is, well, we can use all this technology. The human in the loop component can never be removed. And that as lawyers, it really is not any different from supervising a very junior associate's work product before a memo goes out or a brief goes out. If we use generative AI to create briefs or memos or summaries, we are still responsible for that output. And we need to sort of make sure that we do not release out in the world something that has not been submitted to the proper review and channels. We also have the disclosure problem that probably you guys have been talking about, which is covered in 1.5 and 1.7. do we need to tell our lawyers that we are using technology that has Gen AI capabilities? The ABA just issued in July of 2024 a formal opinion, opinion 512. And I think that opinion is very interesting. They don't really make a lot of distinction between AI and generative AI. So it's a little bit muddled there in the middle, but I think it really provides some guidance. It leans towards transparency, which I also agree with. I think in our engagement letters to our client, we should disclose that we're using this. I think a lot of insurance companies are reaching out to us, asking us, what type of malpractice claims can arise when disclosure does not happen. So I guess it's something to be considered. So those are kind of the rules that govern our world that we need to be concerned with. What do we do going forward? And I'm sorry, how many more minutes do I have? I lost track of time here.
You're fine. You're just at time, so we can start having the board members ask you questions.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Thank you so much. That was fascinating. I love to hear that legal perspective as well. So, board members, come on back online. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, Michelle, I have a question.
Okay.
Hi, Lourdes. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too.
So I think you mentioned formal opinion 512. I've read that. Current USPAP guidance states that appraisers should be able to describe the overall process of an AI tool. I believe that's somewhat covered in 512 as well, that highlights the importance of lawyers having a reasonable understanding of AI capabilities and limitations. What are some effective ways attorneys and appraisers alike can demonstrate a sufficient understanding of these tools?
Well, that is a very good question, because I don't think lawyers really have a sufficient understanding of the tool. But training your appraisers, as we are training our lawyers, in sort of the ins and outs of generative AI versus traditional AI, I think that's where we start. We have to understand how they are significantly different and riskier, and why. So I think that's one of the things we need to do. And the other thing that we need to do is, as lawyers, and maybe you as an appraiser, when you are using technology, whatever it is, right? We use a document management technology or a matter management technology provider that says, oh, we have this amazing new release. We're now embedding generative AI in our matter management system, in our document management system. What we need to do is we need to send them a checklist of questions that talk about or that ask the vendor to disclose to us what type of data retention, data minimization, data training they're using this for. So we call that vendor due diligence. It depends on what type of vendor. But I think it's very important for lawyers, and whether you're dealing with a specific matter or with your law firm practice management as a whole, and you're using a tool, to go to your vendor that is now saying we're using generative AI, and get sort of a data protection agreement in place. I think that's sort of best practices from now on.
Do we have any additional questions?
Yes, thank you, Michelle. Lourdes, thank you so much for such a detailed and comprehensive presentation. It was really terrific. Given the evolving landscape of AI laws and regulations, as well as the rapid development of AI tools, what is your outlook on the convergence of these laws and regulations and the evolution of AI technologies?
I think, as usual, the regulators and lawyers are far behind the curve. The technology has already moved so fast ahead of where we are. And I think that's the bigger issue, or the bigger question. It is inevitable that it will transform how we deliver legal services. But more importantly, it is inevitable that it will transform how society as a whole handles and views computing intelligence and what that means. It's very, very risky. Ultimately, we are towards the Space Odyssey 2001, when we're going to basically maybe not have all the control that we want. So I think when you talk to AI, generative AI legal futurists, they will tell you that we are moving into this combination of, no division between human brain and artificial intelligence. And it's pretty scary, right? At some point, we're going to really have to think about proper laws and regulations to ground us into what we need to do. And I think that's when, the fact that the EU has, gone ahead with this act that they're going to start enforcing in 2026 will be a guiding sort of force, because we do a lot of business in Europe, all of our companies do. So we'll be bound by those rules anyway. So sort of translating those into US laws and regulations. And I think it will start also a very grassroots movement. I think New York is taking the lead on all of this, and states that you would not expect, like Utah, Arizona, and Colorado, are also taking the lead. You don't know where that's going to come from, but it's all very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lourdes. That was just a phenomenal presentation, as were all the other ones preceding it. And now we're going to go into Chandra Mast's presentation. She is our next panelist. Chandra, you have 10 minutes on the floor, and you'd like to introduce yourself and give us your thoughts on this topic.
Hi, good afternoon, Michelle. I'm Chandra Mast. I'm a general appraiser here in Lancaster County, and I would like to thank the ASB for having me here. I'm humbled to be a part of this panel with all of these amazing speakers, and I've already learned some interesting things. I'm here, I use AI every single day. I'm a one-woman shop, and as such, I have to leverage robots on the daily basis. And I have these two questions here in front of me. How are appraisers integrating generative AI into their practice? And my answer to that when I submitted here is not a lot of appraisers are using it to their full capacity. There's a lot of one-shots and little uses here and there. But in general, when I talk to some appraisers, their answer is they just don't have time to learn anything new, or they already have their ways that work for them, and they don't really want to pick up these new tools. On the other side of things, when we're in these artificial intelligence spaces, there's really only less than 3% of the users using the paid version of these tools. So when you're using the free version of ChatGPT 3.5, for instance, there is a lot more confidentiality risk because some of that information is going up into a large language model. But I think people think it's going up word for word and element by element, but it's not. It's coming back, and it's really properties of archetypes that are going up to the large language model. These archetypes are learning about our culture. What I do on a daily basis, the two biggest ways that I use artificial intelligence is, number one, in my Excel, I have Garage Labs installed, which is from Microsoft, and that creates an advanced formula environment, which is a lot more interactive and available to me than regular Excel. I tie in my ChatGPT API with Excel, and then I can talk to ChatGPT right in my Excel workbook and have it work with my data and talk to me in ways that, with natural language processing, sometimes you want to know how to do a certain formula, but you don't quite speak all the Excel words. And then I also use AI to build custom GPTs, which are, with the enterprise model, it is secure for my business, and it does not go up and train the large language models. I have 40 custom GPTs now that I've built, and they help me with every aspect of my business, from marketing to expenses to learning about different markets when I'm doing reports. And when you've activated Code Interpreter, then you have a higher level of assessment on numbers and putting together information. The custom GPTs allow you to upload 10 documents, PDFs, and typically 2 or 3 Excel files. And so you can contextualize all that information into one chat. And then because they are limited to 10 documents each, between the GPTs, I can call them up between each other and have them all give their highly informed opinions and use that back and forth. It's an interesting intersectionality that we're at right now with generative AI. This type of tech didn't exist 2 years ago. And so where we are now, the first year was a lot of exploring and basically uncovering a map that was hidden from a lot of us. And where we are today, a lot of that map has been revealed now, and we're looking for daily use cases that can help us. We don't yet have anything that passes the toothbrush test, for lack of a better term, something that is low risk and easy to use every day. We don't have that out of the box solution. So we're still, each of the camps are working on that right now. And by camps, I mean there's the data quality wars, which are trying to get us good quality data, data that's not transitory, that doesn't disappear in a few minutes, data that has longer context windows. The second camp is the GPU rich and poor camps. We have some users that have a lot of GPU available to them and some that just have small models. And that's creating a real gap in progress between various sectors of the industry. There's the multimodality camp, which is pushing text into images, text to videos, image to videos, visual intelligence, and all the generative AI where you work with images. And then finally, there's the RAG camp, which is where I spend a lot of my time building RAG models because they are so powerful to contextualize going forward. Let's see, what time is it here? 2:08. I have a few more minutes.
Yep, you have a few more minutes. You're fine.
Okay. So working with artificial intelligence every day, right now, the next step that a lot of the RAGs are going towards is agentic AI, where we're having the GPTs not just contextualize 10 documents in 3 different Excel files, but also reach out into the world and do things on our behalf. That comes through tools like Zapier and such. But we still have issues with, we talked about a lot about confidentiality today. I would love it if ChatGPT could remember more of what we talk about. The transient nature of the data, it just disappears after a few days. If I try to pick up a chat from 5 days ago, chances are ChatGPT is not going to remember most of it, even at the paid level. So I have to remind it what's been going on, or I have to export a summary of our conversation to reseed what we're talking about. Context windows, we're trying to get them longer, but right now they're just so short. So a lot of these issues with confidentiality and what's going up to the GPTs, if I could get it to remember more, that would help me a lot. And there's a lot of tips and tricks that we try to do to get it to remember. So from a personal standpoint, certainly I'm not going to put my social security number or my checking or credit card numbers up to it. But a lot of the confidentiality issues, those questions are fears from the current system. And where we're going, the fears are changing, the risks are changing. We are moving, as Lords mentioned, to artificial general intelligence, where things are going to tie even closer together. And then pretty soon into singularity, where there's not going to be really any division of what's happening. And that's all the camps are moving towards that. That's just less than a few years out, in my opinion. So it's really interesting space right now to be an appraiser.
I love that presentation. It's just so exciting to think about what the future will hold. I have to say a quick note. When my nephew was a very small boy, he's 25 now, but when my nephew was very, very small, about 4 years old, I was making microwave popcorn for him. And he said, why can't you just tell it what temperature you want it to be instead of putting in how many minutes? And I thought, oh, the young, they have such great ideas. Okay, board members, you want to come back on and let's see if we have any questions for Chandra.
Yeah, Chandra, I have a question for you. I found what you talked about absolutely fascinating, and I love that you brought it in from a practical application. And so I have just one question about how do you ensure confidential information remains confidential and in compliance with USPAP when using these generative AI tools?
Well, I'm not uploading information from the clients. when typically it's a lot of market analysis that's occurring. And after I've analyzed the market and gotten to my different perspective points on the market analysis, then I'm building it all over in Excel. I'm building it off the GPT. So GPT is really there for analyzing all the information. I mean, we have some reports where I have to have, there's a 900-page document here, there's a 500-page document here, there's a 300-page document here. And sometimes contextualizing the most recent versions of all these large, fair housing and HUD and all of these things into one time, it gets late, your brain shuts down sometimes, and we're not perfect humans. It's hard to remember every word from every document, especially as a general appraiser. When I'm going from different asset type to different asset type and doing a lot of different things, I have to understand a lot of these different markets. And there are reports coming out every day that I have to absorb and contextualize. So that's easier when I have a custom GPT and I work with it that way. One of the things that has to be done, there's training the GPT, and the whole process takes several weeks. Then you have to tune it, and then you have to test it to make sure it's giving you accurate results, and putting it through haptic testing to make sure you're getting the correct results. Because if it's giving you a syncophatic bias and just mirroring what it wants you to hear, what you want it to hear, as Jim was mentioning, that's not really going to work. So I have to put it through a haptic testing to make sure that the answers it's giving me are accurate to what's going on. And then I might have to go back to the training process and train it with different elements and retune it with custom instructions and go through the whole haptic process again until I'm ready to use it for a good data analysis.
Any other questions for Chandra?
Yeah, this is Zach Myers. Chandra, you did a great job. I want to ask sort of the same question I asked Jim earlier. Given your knowledge as an appraiser, what do you believe is lacking from the guidance, such as Advisory Opinion 37 or the rules and standard rules themselves that exist now?
Well, that's a good question. And we're definitely moving into a new area with some of these guidance issues. I think I'm going to echo a bit onto what Jim said, is that the words and what's in the guidance is pretty close right now. It depends on how broad you interpret some of the language that's there. Certainly the understanding of regression is critical, because now instead of just having to know what regression is and how to understand it, you have to guide a GPT through the regression process. And if you don't know what the correct path is through that labyrinth, you're not going to get there in a supportable manner. And so you still have to understand a lot of those things. I've been saying lately that we don't really have mass appraisal anymore. We just have data. And almost, well, every report that I do, I have hundreds and hundreds of data points that I'm looking at with ChatGPT to really study the market, to really refine things. Because as said multiple times in this presentation, the biases that we have in our culture are built into these large language models. And so those are things that have to be measured every time. It's so wonderful, though, to have a model where I can ask it to actually give me a $% difference here and pull out adjustments that I would not have been able to really get the finer nuances before on a big multiple regression model. You can work through it. It takes weeks sometimes to really work through a large multiple regression model, but it's a lot like that. Once you get to a certain part of it, if you realize that your initial premise is off a little bit, you have to go back to the initial premise, drop some data, get more data. You still have to pay attention to everything that comes out of it.
I think we have time for one more question. Is there one more question for Chandra?
Hi, Chandra. Thank you, Michelle. I have a question. Given what you said, Chandra, about that, and AI tools, we're all looking for them to streamline some aspects of the appraisal process. How much technical understanding do you think the average appraiser has to have to use an AI model?
It's going to take some learning. Appraisers are smart people, though. We wouldn't be doing this if we weren't. It's not going to take as much of an undertaking as I think people think it's going to be because of natural language processing. And once people understand how natural language processing works, that you literally are communicating with the bots as you would a human, then it just becomes a matter of refining how you communicate. And that's a little more of a nuanced education than it. And as these tools get handier, that's really where it's going to lie. It's just the nuances of being able to communicate with natural language process and say what you want to say. And it can be an iterative a process in itself. If you prompt it for something and it comes back and the answer is not quite right, you prompt it again and you get another answer. And the process can take a very long conversation. With the RAG models, I found that I'm doing data analysis, I can't push it too quickly to do the graphs. We have to do a lot of descriptive analysis first to really get all the information up in its forebrain until it's really ready to do some deeper level analysis when we're doing exploratory data analysis.
Thank you, Chandra.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chandra. This has just been so enlightening. I really appreciate all the expertise that all the panelists have. And speaking of expert, our next panelist is Burton Lee, and I'm real happy to have him here. Would you like to introduce yourself and give us your topic for the next 10 minutes?
All right. Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate it. My name is Burton Lee. I have been a commercial real estate appraiser for over 30 years, and the last few years have been working on an online commercial automated valuation model. So I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit away from the generative AI and speak really to the AVM side of the world. And this is really driven by the questions that I am asked by prospective AVM users for commercial AVMs. I think they also relate to residential AVMs as well. And so the overarching question is always, what's the reliability of the AVM? How do I know that the AVM is going to produce reliable results? And the answer to that really breaks down into three different elements. One is the data quality that's used, the valuation techniques that are employed, and then the model's performance metrics themselves. And so I'd like to kind of go into each of those areas a little bit. The source of data is important, whether it's public records, MLS, or a proprietary database, potentially even a combination of those. It's important that that information is known. And then the quality of the data falls into what's the scope of the data, how much data is associated with each transaction, what's the accuracy of that data, what's the recency or how current is the data, and what's the relevance of the data that's being used to develop the algorithm for the AVM. So the data quality is critical. And then it's important to understand the valuation techniques that are being employed. Is it comparable sales that are being focused on? Is it income analysis or some combination that's being used in developing the AVM valuation? And then the newer element is the actual model itself's performance metrics. And this really relates to the accuracy of the results that are going to be produced by the algorithm. And this comes out and is presented to a user in the form of a confidence score. The confidence score is a gauge of the model's reliability. So when you develop the AVM, the model itself produces the confidence score. And that confidence score is unique for each analysis based upon the ability of the property being analyzed relative to the testing data that would use in developing the model. So there's multiple ways that a confidence score can be calculated, and there's actually guidance from the Appraisal Journal article that was published in the winter of 2020, known as the Principle of Calculating AVM Performance Metrics, which could be used as a guide for that confidence score. So generally, the higher the confidence score, the more reliable the value conclusion is, and the lower the confidence score implies that there's data quality, data quantity, or model assumption concerns that might need to be looked at. So AVMs might be utilizing artificial intelligence, but they may not be. It's not required. But when they are using artificial intelligence to develop an AVM, then it's important to understand what is being used. What are the methodologies being employed for the regression models? And there's a variety of them. Examples include NGBoost, Light GBM, XGBoost, Nearest Neighbors, Random Forest, and these reasonably can be tested. Not all used, but it's possible that multiple different technologies are used in coming up with the algorithm that comes up with the value. So we've heard discussion about the ethical standards associated with artificial intelligence, and that applies also to AVMs. And these are really items that the vendor needs to be able to provide to a user. And those include the technology transparency, what is actually going on in developing the valuation, a disclosure of the data sources. It's reasonable that a user would understand the data sources so that they can interpret for themselves the likelihood of the data quality that's going into the analysis. And then the third category really is model limitations. These are just models. They're algorithms that have been developed, and there's limitations. They don't apply in all situations, and it's important for a user to understand what those limitations are to make sure that they're not trying to use the AVM in an inappropriate manner. This really brings up the point that's been made before with any AI application, and that is that professional judgment is absolutely required. And so part of the considerations for that professional judgment include the valuation problem that you have at hand, what the intended use of the analysis is, an understanding of the property's unique characteristics, and then the market conditions within which it is operating. Those are things that, again, they relate back to the data, the current recency of the data, how current is it? So the important thing that I want to emphasize is that an AVM analysis is a tool. It's not in and of itself the answer, although with appraisal background and experience and understanding of what they're doing, it could be the answer. So judgment is needed in each and every use of the AVM. Now, there's a recent actually interagency guideline titled Quality Control Standards for Automated Valuation Models. The final rule just came out in July of this year, and it relates to residential mortgages for regulated lenders. And what it's doing is trying to define what a quality AVM includes, and there's some minimum criteria for an AVM to be relied upon by a lender. And those include ensuring a high level of confidence in the estimates produced by the AVM, protecting against the manipulation of data, seeking to avoid conflicts of interest, require random sample testing and reviews, and to promote compliance with the applicable non-discrimination laws. So I think these are good guidelines for any appraiser using an AVM to understand how they relate to what they're trying to do. When thinking about AVMs, I recommend that the appraiser embrace new techniques. AVMs represent a growing part of the valuation landscape, and they're not going away. The relevance of AVMs varies depending on the abundance of data, how much data is available in a particular area, in a particular property type. And when there is adequate data, the AVM can be very effective. When it is less relevant in those situations where you're talking about a special use property, unique or complex properties, maybe a church or something that has a lot less commonality across the property type. It's my personal opinion that AVMs can be used effectively currently and are being used as a check on value. I can give you an example of an appraiser who was appraising an industrial property in an older industrial park, and the value conclusion that they had come up with was higher than the value and the relevant range of value from the AVM. And that was actually a very good thing for them, reassuring, because the property that they were valuing had completely been updated, remodeled, meeting current industry standards for industrial properties in that market. And it was appropriate that it was higher, but not reasonable that the AVM could have picked up all those nuances. The second part that I'd like to believe is that, in my opinion, the appraisal process reflects the market and the actions of market participants. And I believe that AVMs should be used as a fourth approach to value. And examples of that are easy in the residential side. When we had a residential appraisal done on a property of ours, my wife was frustrated because the AVMs that were available were coming up with different values than the appraiser did. And so there was a call back to the appraiser. What happened? Why are they different? And the answer is really a part of the valuation process. So why not include that as a part of the valuation process? Now, does it fit in every situation? No. But just like all of the approaches to value, it should be considered, and where appropriate, should be incorporated into the valuation process. So I'm open to any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you so much. That was so interesting. All the board members, if you'd come back online here. And do we have any questions for Burton Lee?
Yes, Michelle, AJ Hudson here. Burton, thank you for your comments. So you touched on confidence scores. Can you elaborate a bit more on how they're evaluated, tested, and regulated?
Regulated, they're not so much. How they're developed and how they're tested. Basically, what happens when you develop an algorithm, usually for an AVM, you have you take your entire data set of big data, you separate that into a development part of your data and then a testing part of your data. And so the development comes up with the algorithm, and then the algorithm is tested with the remaining part of the data, maybe 80% in the development and 20% in the testing. And then when you're doing that testing, the algorithm determines whether or not how frequently you're getting to the result that you're supposed to be getting to. And that's how the development of the confidence score is created. And it's a function of, on an individual property, how close to the characteristics of that property relate to the algorithm that was created from the larger set of data.
I think we have time for one more question. Is there one more?
Yeah, this is Tim Hansen, Burton. Thank you for the presentation. I just had one question somewhat related to what AJ brought up, but and I think you touched on this a little bit, but are there specific disclosures regarding AVMs, their data sources, which algorithms they rely on, or those confidence scores to consumers?
They are available, and they, in my opinion, should be understood by anyone who is trying to use the AVM as a part of the valuation process. Are they readily available, on the public sites? No, they're not. And the techniques that are used in developing those confidence scores vary, basically to better suit the needs of that particular vendor. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but that's my thinking.
Yeah. Is there anything missing that you think should be required as far as disclosure or not?
Well, I think that understanding what data sources are being used, I think what techniques are being developed, and I think understanding the confidence score should be a part of determining whether one wants to use a particular AVM or not.
Great. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. That was fascinating. And we're down to our last but not least panelist, Dr. John Licata. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. And we're excited to have him here. And everyone stay tuned, because after this presentation, we are going to answer some of the questions that have come in with time permitting. Dr. Licata.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So, well, I want to kind of make my perspective and background clear here. So I'm a professor, and my research area is in natural language processing and its intersection with reasoning. A lot of that's in legal reasoning and reasoning in accordance with regulations. So how do we ensure that AI can follow laws and regulations properly? How do we ensure that it provides coherent justifications for its conclusions, and so on? So a lot of what's been said by the previous panels, I think, is great. A lot of emphasis have been placed on competency, being aware of potential biases, so on. I'm going to try not to repeat what they all said, but there's also a couple things I heard that I disagree with. I think it's important to emphasize the importance of transparency, justification, and third-party verifiability of the capabilities of the AI systems. I'll expand more on that in a second. Just to answer this first question, how rapidly is AI evolving? What implications does this have? There are three ways that I see and want to emphasize. The first is that we're in kind of an AI hype cycle, right? There's a lot of AI hype. We might be at a peak right now. As a result, people are jumping on the bandwagon. A lot of misinformation being spread about what AI can and can't do, or even what AI actually is, right? AI is not just ChatGPT. I have to emphasize that every time I talk to people about this. The second is, as the hype dies down, people are going to start looking for serious solutions and applications. People are going to start looking for ways to use AI in a way that is not tainted by those who were just trying to capitalize on the hype. They want ways that have more guarantee and quality, right? And so the third, and this is where I disagree with something that was said earlier, look, there's a wide diversity of tools that use AI available now, right? AI is not just ChatGPT. AI is not even just LLMs or chatbots, right? And there are dramatic differences in the strengths and weaknesses of those systems, even within a single system, within a single LLM, depending on how it's used, depending on what prompt you use, there can be a significant difference in performance. So I think an earlier panelist, I'm sorry, I forgot who, said that there shouldn't be required disclosure which AI tools you use unless it makes a difference in the outcome. Well, here's the thing. Not only is there going to be a difference in outcome with every single tool you use, but the way you use the tool, which prompt you use, which training data should be disclosed, because there could be problems with how you use them that are not apparent unless you allow for third-party verification and testing. If you say otherwise, I mean, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of how these systems work. In many cases, language models' outputs randomly sample from a probability distribution That's why if you query GPT with the same thing multiple times, you may get different results. Absolute transparency so that there can be third-party verification of the soundness of the methods used, such that it's done by qualified experts, I think is absolutely crucial for the future of your field. So the second question, what best practices are other professional service industries adopting, and how can these be applied to a profession? So we're learning a lot more about when to trust the outputs of LLMs, right? And when not to. And most importantly, how to tell the difference. And appraisal, spends a lot of time dealing with very subtle interpretations of complex laws, rules, and regulations. And these happen to be the kinds of things that current state-of-the-art AI is kind of bad at, right? So there's a recent example, the city of New York released a chatbot that was supposed to be able to answer questions about the often very complicated laws and regulations of New York City. And it very quickly, it started giving out not only wrong, but dangerously wrong information to users. Someone asked it, is it okay to deny accepting Section 8 vouchers? It said, yeah, go ahead. You can deny them all you want, right? You can't do that. That's not allowed by law. Someone asked whether restaurant owners could take a percentage of employees' tips. It said, yeah, go ahead. That's fine. That's not allowed either, right? So when you enter domains where there are a lot of laws and regulations governing what is and is not permissible, and appraisal is absolutely one of those domains, you're entering a problem space where even state-of-the-art AI has serious limitations. I work with this stuff every day. We are, as a field, working on it to make it better, but it's not entirely there yet where you can give it over to people that don't understand what its limitations are, right? So I think someone earlier said that because these systems are using natural language processing, we don't need to worry too much about the level of training that appraisers receive before they can use these systems in their work. No, the more natural language is, in fact, the more we introduce the potential for the kind of imprecision and ambiguity that leads to inconsistent and frankly incorrect interpretations of law and regulation. We need people that use these tools, if they're using them in a way that is seriously going to affect people's lives, right, to understand what's going on under the hood, because natural reasoning is actually pretty bad, right? That's why we have a lot of external rules to constrain and govern what you're allowed to do in domains like this. So what are we going to see in terms of best practices? Well, I think approaches that leverage the strengths of AI, things like retrieval, creating initial suggestions, generating initial ideas, finding vulnerabilities, right? That's going to find their ways into best practices. But on the other side, we're going to see practices that say if you use AI, you got to have training in what its limitations are. You need to know when to use it and when not to. You can't just throw AI at everything and expect magic, right? There's a lot of nuance to it. Some earlier, this advisory opinion 37 was mentioned. I'm not in this field, so I'm learning about this today for the first time. I think it's a great step in the right direction. There's this talk about a competency rule, which I want to learn more about. But let me add to that, you got to involve genuine AI experts, right? Competency in AI is a moving line, right? What constitutes competency in state-of-the-art AI is changing so quickly. Every single day, I try to, for my career, I try to keep up with everything AI for a living. And believe me, it is a lot of work. Every day there's something new. It feels like there's a new breakthrough. So you got to involve actual AI experts, could be faculty at universities, people who are actively engaged with state-of-the-art research in the field. I think is absolutely crucial for any practice that requires competency in what AI is and is not capable of. Okay, yeah. So I think that's it for my time.
I could just sit and listen to you. This is the second time I've heard you present, and I could sit and listen to you for a long time, as with all the other panelists too. This has just been phenomenal. So do we have any questions for Dr. Licata?
Yeah, hey, Michelle, I have a question. Thanks for that really great presentation. So I think you kind of touched on a little bit about maybe part of my question. I'm just going to kind of phrase it, and then you can kind of take the other part. I think that you can maybe enlighten us a little bit more on. AI has the ability to retrieve data, make suggestions about data, and analyze it, and generate outputs similar to what an appraiser might do. So that's kind of what we've been talking about. Obviously, there's significant limitations, there's competency concerns, there's all these things. Which of the steps might be compromised by AI's current limitations, and which are likely to improve or remain static in the near future and in the long-term future?
Oh yeah, yes. There's a broad range of answers to that, but the way that, and when I say AI, I'm going to just refer to large language models like the ones underlying ChatGPT. The way in which they're trained is kind of complicated. So there's the classic, train cycle where we just feed it a bunch of data and do what we call pre-training, and then there's usually another training step now that's become increasingly popular where we fine-tune it on actual human conversations, and then there's the step where we have it draw from previous conversations that with the current user that it's talking to, and then there's also learning from the individual prompt, and then there's RAG retrieval stuff that's so it's becoming increasingly difficult to actually know where biases are being introduced in this really complex training pipeline, right? So the other day I typed in my name to ChatGPT. I said, "Who is John Liccato?" Right, and it actually did a search and it found information about me on some websites, and wow, that was great. So now it actually cited the websites that it got information from me from. But then I did a separate query and I said, "Who's John Liccato? Do not search any websites or anything like that." And it said, "Well, based on what I think, it sounds like he's a professor that does AI research." And I said, how do you know that, right? What is it about the information I gave you that makes you conclude that? And it says, well, the name John Liccato just sounds like it's an AI researcher who does work in, and I thought, well, I never thought my name, predetermined me to enter this career. But the thing is, the bias in this case, not necessarily a harmful one, was introduced at some step in the training process. It probably found information about me on some website and incorporated that in. But when you ask it to explain where it got that information, it doesn't know, right? That's embedded too deeply in the training process. So that raises the question, what other information is embedded in there? What other biases are embedded in there that even if you ask it to explain itself, it may not be able to do so, right? So, yeah.
Any other questions that we have? Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, John, I have a question. That was a fascinating response, and just the application of your experience with that scenario I found very intriguing. And so along those same lines, what ethical challenges surround the application, the development of AI tools that might undermine the public trust in the appraisal practice?
Yeah, I could go on for hours about this question, but one thing that's been emerging over the past few years, this conflict between closed and open source models and procedures, right? It's a very difficult question. So, back in the good old days, I mean, 3 or 4 years ago, Google would train a new language model and they would release everything, right? They would release the entire language model weights, the data sets that were used to train it. They would publish papers that were open to the public on it, and we could download them and run them and test them, and we'd find all kinds of problems, of course, but then we'd learn ways to fix them and all of that. OpenAI, ironically, because of its name, right, was the first to kind of say we're not going to release the language model weights anymore, right? Then they kind of closed it down a little more. They said we're not even going to release what the architecture of the system is. We're not even going to release which data was used to train it, right? And that has become the new standard for large companies. Even Google's models are starting to be more closed off. And because of that, it makes it more difficult to know how we can test it to actually see where the biases are, where the limitations in reasoning are. We might say, well, there's all these benchmarks that we can use to test how well they fight bias and are fair, but those benchmarks are typically public, and OpenAI can just train it to answer those properly and then release that in the next version, right? So does that mean that it's going to perform well Next time we do it, that's not clear. And from the business case, you can understand it completely, right? They spend millions and millions of dollars on this. They don't want to just give it out to everybody, right? But at the same time, it harms transparency and the ability to third-party verify what the true limitations and strengths of these language models actually are. I think that's going to be a real big problem for ethical questions moving forward.
Thank you so much. So that's the conclusion of the panelists. So now we're going to hear some of the questions that were posted in the chat box and on the Q&A. And if you have a burning question that you didn't have time to get into the Q&A, let us know. Thank you so much to all the panelists for joining us today. And we're going to move right into Q&A. If you want to, again, a verbal comment, just let us know. Aida, you will be monitoring, I believe, any hands raised. And can you let us know if we have any questions? I think there are. I've been watching them.
Thank you, Michelle. We actually have questions in the chat, in the Q&A box. I think we have close to 30 questions so far. So this is going to be quite interesting how we're going to tackle it.
Okay, let's do it succinctly as best we can. What do we got?
Okay, sounds good. So the first one is AI is not reproducible. Asking AI the same question today and in 1 month that will result in different answers. How do you reconcile this with the requirement to keep the results in a work file?
So let's have all the panelists come back on camera, and that's probably best directed at one of the appraisers on the panel. Who would like to take a shot at that?
Michelle, I'll take a quick shot at it.
Okay, Jim.
What I do is I just keep a copy of my transcript with whatever model that I'm using. Print that out and stick it in the file, actually create an HTML file of it so I've got access to all the images and all of that. It is a real concern, and it goes to the nature of these models. There is a bit of randomness built into them. But I would also argue that if you ask me the same question 6 times over a 3-week period, I'm probably going to give you a slightly different answer each time. That doesn't mean that I'm wrong the 5th, 6th, and 7th time you ask me. It just means it's slightly different. But I think in general, the context will be the same. So as an appraiser, just print that stuff out or save it digitally so you've got it in a work file if you need it.
Okay, let's take a different question then, Aida.
Okay, sounds good. Sean, there were a few questions during your section. So this is one that I was able to catch. Is the AI the second industrial revolution, as some commentators have described? And what are your thoughts on that?
I don't consider myself enough of an academic to answer that question, but I will say that I mean, it's difficult to quantify and put into terms how technology affects our daily lives. And the AI that can be applied using that technology is going to significantly impact everything that we do, whether it's our jobs every day or how we drive a car to how we get a recipe to how we watch TV or whatever, and how we get our news. So I will say that it's going to have a significant impact on how we operate our daily lives.
Okay, what other questions do we have for the panelists?
Thank you. So I think this could be for a couple of the panelists. And the question is, what AI tools are available now that can help with the financial modeling? And there's also a second part, AI seems limited to sales comparison approach, ? Is this accurate?
I'll answer that one. I'll take that one. I use the GPTs for all 3 approaches. I don't think there's any limitations to where they can or can't be useful. Now, when it comes to the income approach, most of that is done on Excel. But again, I have my API tied to Excel. So if something comes up, I can just right click and work it in there. And a lot of it, it's not just ChatGPT. There's also Perplexity. There's Claude. So if you get some information from ChatGPT that's maybe not quite up to date, maybe you want to take it over to Claude and run it by another bot and see what that bot thinks, and then take it to Perplexity and see what Perplexity thinks. Perplexity is more of a research model that gives citations on everything it does. And if I just need a quick rent for a city, what's a 3-bedroom rent on luxury apartments? I can go to Perplexity and ask it to give me this information in tabulated format for the last 3 months within a 5-mile radius of this particular address, and it will. And it's going to give me the address of the apartment units, the rents, the dates, and then I can use that data to call these places and verify if that's the correct rent. It's such a leap forward in saving me a lot of the research on the ground to see what are possible apartments that I'm going to want to call. I don't have to worry about doing a lot of that. I can just I'm orchestrating the event, and it's a lot quicker for all approaches, including the market analysis.
Thank you. And I think John has his hand. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I think that's great. I like using Perplexity too. I think it's important to remind everybody that even if it does provide sources, it doesn't mean that the sources are actually correct. So the example that I cited earlier when I said, when I was talking about the New York City chatbot, and it gave incorrect advice on tips, it actually provided a source. It said, for more information, look at this website, right? And the website said the exact opposite of what the chatbot told it. So I think it's important because if you understand how RAG works, right, it's often just using some sort of simplified and quicker calculation for similarity analysis, right? So it might find a website that is relevant, but not understand why it's relevant. And so if it provides a source, you got to read that source and make sure that it actually says what you think it says.
Thank you. And actually, I have a question for Lourdes. And I think, Lourdes, I mentioned this a bit earlier. The question is, can you summarize a situation where an attorney was sanctioned by a judge from using artificial intelligence for case research where the AI used provided false cases that were cited in pleadings?
Yeah, I think that probably refers to a case in Manhattan about a year ago, but there has been other cases as well. So ultimately, the short answer to that is that the attorney committed malpractice, right? It doesn't really matter whether they're using LexisNexis, ChatGPT. Ultimately, before you submit anything to the court, as a court officer, you need to be assured that the responses are accurate. So I think the problem with that particular lawyer is that he's a terrible lawyer, or she, I don't remember. They're a terrible lawyer, but so that's not excusable, right? It doesn't really matter. Now, take that one step further, there is a lot of investment in legal tech. There is a lot of investment specifically in legal research technology. Co-counsel, LexisNexis, Westlaw Precision, they're all claiming to be using Gen AI, and the fees are significant per user. Some big firms are testing it out. I think Stanford released a study earlier this year, maybe in May, that shows that they hallucinate, even the ones that you pay for hallucinate a significant % of the time. So ultimately, you need a human in the loop and an expert analyzing the output, right? I mean, that's the same thing with appraisers, I would think. The rules that we have don't change. The tools are dangerous because they can provide the false confidence or comfort that they are correct when they, in fact, I mean, they sound so good, right? Like they try to please you. Maybe John can explain why they try to please you so much. But ultimately, this is not an AI issue or a Gen AI issue. It is a malpractice, terrible lawyer issue.
Thank you. Burton, I have a question for you that also came in. It says, AVMs have been around for a while. How do you see the newer generation of AI technology specifically impacting development and use of AVMs?
Unfortunately, I don't have any idea how that's going to progress. I just don't know. I apologize, but I don't have any thoughts on the matter.
Got it. Thank you. No worries. It does also kind of go on. It says, if AVM is used as a fourth method to valuation, how might an appraiser be able to opine to the reliability of an AVM from the results of a black box algorithm that are not known by the appraiser? In other words, an appraiser doesn't even know that the data is or what the data is used.
Well, and that's where, in my opinion, the sources of the data the techniques that are being deployed in order to come up with the algorithm, and the statistical analysis that the algorithm represents based on the data that was analyzed, I think can give you a comfort level that that it has meaning or it doesn't. And there are a lot of factors that go into play there. But when that information is available, you should be able to have confidence in the results that are created. And then again, the confidence score for that individual analysis should help in determining how much reliance should go on into that particular evaluation.
Great, thank you. Jim, I have a question for you. I think you might have seen it in the chat, but I can read it again. It says, Jim, isn't the difference between software packages as we traditionally think of them and generative AI, it's comparing apples to oranges? I asked that since traditional software packages don't have the same impact on our opinions and thus the need for declaration of use.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And to me, they're both tools, and neither of them can function properly without human intervention. If you put something wrong in a form, it's going to print it out the wrong way. If you use artificial intelligence in the wrong way or inappropriately, you're going to get a similar response. I understand the nuance of your question. And I think nuance is really important because you are getting kind of outputs from an LLM or from other AI models. But again, I think ultimately it comes down to your personal responsibility. And nuance is important because I don't think John and I disagree that much on transparency. Anything that's consumer facing, you absolutely need to let the consumers know that they are interacting with that. If you have a chatbot set up on your appraisal website to answer questions, people need to understand that that is in fact not a human responding to you. But if I use ChatGPT or Perplexity or Julius or any of the other models out there to help me develop an Excel formula, I just don't think I need to disclose that in the appraisal report.
Thank you. And I have two more questions, one for Chandra and one for John, and hopefully that will be the end, Michelle. I know we have many. So Chandra, the question is, how did you determine that these are accurate? My concern would be accuracy less than security. And I think it was part of your discussion that you mentioned at the beginning. I don't remember what it's referring to.
When I'm putting together a custom GPT, and I build one at this point for every job that I do. And for each job, I'm going to put in the local ordinance. I'm going to put in some local market information, if there is a recent economic publication, newspaper articles. And I've been building a custom GPT now for every single job. And in the course of training it and then tuning it with the instructions, you need to test the outputs that it gives you to see what information it's drawing from. Make sure that it's drawing from the documents that I've uploaded instead of going out and making up information on the internet. Because of its predictive quality, it likes to think that it knows the answer to everything. So sometimes it won't read the entire document. Sometimes it'll read part of the document and just assume it knows the rest of the document. And that presents some challenges when you're working through things, but testing happens every step of the way. And then once you get those answers, it all comes back over for me to Excel. And at that point, I can rebuild it in kind of the old-fashioned way a lot quicker. Because now I already know the direct path to value. I know what comps to isolate out, where to start my adventure and chase down more research and do more deep digging. I can eliminate outliers really quickly in a market and eliminate and see really where the trends are coming together. And without the testing and haptic testing, and that starts with testing it on questions you know the answer to, and then building it up to contextual questions that are within the documents you put in there. There's constant testing. And it can give you wrong information, but we're not going back. This toothpaste is out of the tube, so it's here to stay.
Thank you. And John, I have a two-part question for you. The first part is, what are some AI systems or platform that can be used in analyzing data in the market for real estate appraisers? And the second one is, by closed and open source data, are you referencing it off premises or an on-premise data?
Well, the first one, if it's just a simple thing that you want to analyze, then honestly, ChatGPT is just going to be fine. You can upload a CSV file and then ask it to, do some calculations for you. And I think, kind of like just Jim said, if you ask it to tell you what formula it uses in making those calculations, then you can kind of inspect that formula itself, and then the formula can be the justification. You don't need to provide further justification for why you got that formula, but the formula itself becomes the justification in that case, right? And the second question, remind me again, sorry.
Sure. By closed and open source data, are you referencing off-premises and on-premises data?
No, I'm referring to the ability to third-party inspect it. So the capability, if someone says, "Hey, I got a language model or an AI that gets 100% accuracy on this I don't know, ability to identify resumes for which one should be a good employee," right? I want to see what data you use to train it, because it could be that they use improper training procedures and they actually told it which resumes were good, right? I want to see how you did the split, the train and test split, and I want to be able to test that model to see if I feed it other resumes that maybe are not in the domain that it trained on, does it still perform as well? So the openness is the ability to do that by third parties that don't necessarily have access to it.
Thank you.
Thank you all so incredibly much. This was just so enlightening, and I see a lot of people putting notes in the comments to us that this was wonderful, that this forum was held proactively and not reactively. I saw that comment, and that the expert panelists all provided such fantastic information. So thank you all very, very much. So folks, the next time the ASB will hold a public meeting will take place in just a few weeks, September 26th at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We want to thank you for joining us today, and we will keep you informed on the work of the board related to this topic. Take care.